The Supreme Court just dropped a decision that absolutely blindsided Donald Trump. And the fallout was immediate. Within moments of the ruling going public, Trump erupted online, launching furious attacks against the very institution he once believed would protect him. This wasn't a routine loss or a minor procedural setback. This was a seismic legal blow that strikes at the heart of Trump's entire strategy for avoiding criminal accountability. What makes this ruling especially shocking is how unexpected it was. Trump's legal team believed they still had time. They assumed any decision would come later, perhaps closer to the end of the court's term, giving them room to spin the outcome or regroup. Instead, the ruling landed suddenly during a regular decision release, catching Trump and his lawyers completely off guard, and the result was devastating. Almost immediately, Trump took to social media, unleashing a barrage of angry posts. He accused the court of betrayal, claimed the decision was politically motivated, and portrayed himself as the victim of a corrupt system. But beneath the rage was something far more telling: panic. Because this ruling doesn't just hurt Trump, it dismantles the legal foundation he's been relying on for years. To understand why this decision matters so much, you have to understand how heavily Trump has been betting on the Supreme Court to save him. Since leaving office and becoming entangled in multiple criminal cases, Trump has consistently framed the court as his final shield. He appointed 3 justices during his presidency, helping create a conservative supermajority that he openly believed would be sympathetic to his arguments. Over and over again, Trump told allies and supporters that lower courts didn't matter. The Supreme Court would eventually step in and shut everything down. His legal approach followed a clear pattern: lose at the trial level, lose on appeal, delay endlessly, and then hope the Supreme Court would intervene. Trump's team repeatedly argued that his cases weren't ordinary criminal matters, but constitutional emergencies, situations where the judiciary supposedly needed to protect presidential power from political prosecutors. The goal wasn't just to win on the merits. It was to stall, confuse, and elevate every issue to the highest court possible. At the center of this strategy was a sweeping claim that former presidents should be immune from criminal prosecution for actions taken while in office. Trump's lawyers argued that allowing prosecutions would cripple future presidents, discourage decisive action, and invite endless political retaliation. They framed Trump's conduct not as criminal behavior, but as official presidential acts that courts had no authority to punish. This argument wasn't accidental. It was carefully tailored to appeal to conservative judicial philosophies emphasizing executive power and separation of powers. Trump's legal team hoped the court's conservative majority, including the justices he personally selected, would be receptive. And for a long time, Trump genuinely believed that was the case. That belief fueled his public confidence. Trump repeatedly assured supporters that the Supreme Court understood what was happening and wouldn't allow what he called witch hunts to continue. Delay was the entire game. If he could keep cases tied up long enough, he believed the court would rescue him, or failing that, the election would. But this week, that illusion collapsed. The Supreme Court didn't offer Trump a narrow procedural escape. It didn't issue a carefully worded delay. It didn't split cleanly along ideological lines. Instead, it delivered a clear, forceful rejection of the legal theories Trump has been pushing across multiple cases. The ruling directly undermines the idea that former presidents enjoy special constitutional protection from prosecution. Even more damaging for Trump, the decision wasn't driven solely by liberal justices. Several conservative justices, including ones Trump appointed, joined the majority rejecting his arguments. That detail matters. It strips Trump of his favorite defense, claiming he lost only because of partisan bias. This wasn't a close call. It wasn't a technical loss. It was a statement from the nation's highest court that Trump's legal reasoning simply doesn't hold up. The court made it clear that the presidency does not place someone above the law, and that criminal cases against Trump can move forward without the constitutional roadblocks he's been trying to erect. For Trump, this represents more than a bad day in court. It's the collapse of his most important legal lifeline. The Supreme Court he reshaped did not bend to him. The justices he counted on did not protect him. And the strategy he's leaned on for years is now in serious jeopardy. And this is just the beginning. To really grasp how damaging this Supreme Court ruling is for Donald Trump, you have to zoom out and look at the broader legal battlefield he's been navigating. Trump isn't dealing with one isolated case. He's facing dozens of felony charges across multiple jurisdictions, all moving on parallel tracks. From the moment those cases began, his objective has been simple: stop the trials from ever reaching a jury, at least until after the election. Every motion, every appeal, every constitutional argument has served that single purpose: delay. Trump's lawyers have flooded courts with requests to dismiss charges, pause proceedings, exclude evidence, and challenge the authority of prosecutors themselves. None of this has been about clearing his name quickly. It's been about running out the clock. At the center of that effort was the claim of presidential immunity. Trump's attorneys argued that once someone becomes president, criminal accountability for actions taken while in office effectively disappears. According to this theory, the presidency is so powerful, so unique, that criminal law simply cannot touch it, even after the president leaves office. From the beginning, most legal scholars viewed this argument as deeply flawed. The Constitution does not grant presidents blanket immunity from prosecution. In fact, the entire American system was built around the idea that no one is above the law. The founders explicitly rejected the concept of an untouchable executive, but Trump's team pushed forward anyway, hoping that a sympathetic court, or at least confusion and delay, would give them leverage. The immunity argument became especially important in Trump's federal case, tied to his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Trump claimed that everything he did surrounding the election, pressuring officials, spreading false claims, and attempting to cling to power, fell within his official duties as president. Because of that, he argued, criminal prosecution was unconstitutional. His lawyers went even further. They claimed that impeachment was the only legitimate remedy for presidential misconduct, and that because Trump was impeached but not convicted by the Senate, criminal charges were off the table. In other words, they argued that acquittal by a political body should permanently block prosecution in a court of law. Prosecutors responded bluntly. They argued that Trump's conduct wasn't presidential decision-making. It was personal, political, and criminal. Trying to overturn an election, they said, isn't part of any president's constitutional role, and accepting Trump's theory would mean a president could commit crimes with impunity as long as they labeled their actions official. Lower courts overwhelmingly agreed with prosecutors. Judges at the district and appellate levels rejected Trump's immunity claims again and again. But Trump kept appealing, confident that the Supreme Court would eventually intervene. When the court agreed to hear the case, Trump treated it as a victory. Even before a ruling, the mere act of taking the case delayed his trial further. After oral arguments, Trump's team felt encouraged. Some of the justices asked probing questions, and Trump's lawyers convinced themselves they might secure at least a partial win, perhaps a ruling that carved out broad protections for presidential acts. Instead, they got the opposite. The Supreme Court's decision dismantled Trump's immunity argument piece by piece. The court made clear that while presidents may have limited protections for legitimate official acts, those protections do not extend to personal criminal conduct, even if it occurs during a presidency. The opinion emphasized that criminal law applies to former presidents just as it applies to everyone else. Crucially, the court drew a sharp line between governing and self-preservation. Actions taken to remain in power despite losing an election, the court explained, are not part of a president's constitutional duties. They are personal acts aimed at benefiting the individual, not the nation. The ruling also rejected Trump's impeachment-based defense. The court explained that impeachment and criminal prosecution serve entirely different purposes. One is political, designed to remove officials from office. The other is legal, designed to punish violations of law. There is no constitutional rule preventing both from occurring. Perhaps the most damaging element for Trump was the vote breakdown. This wasn't a razor-thin decision split along predictable ideological lines. The majority included conservative justices, including ones Trump appointed, who joined in rejecting his claims. That reality alone destroys Trump's narrative that his prosecutions are purely partisan attacks. The message from the court was unmistakable. Trump's legal theories fail, his prosecutions are constitutional, and the cases against him can move forward. Trump's response was immediate and explosive. Within minutes of the ruling's release, he began posting online, denouncing the decision as catastrophic and accusing the court of weakness and corruption. He attacked individual justices, questioned their motives, and portrayed the ruling as evidence that the entire system was rigged against him. This wasn't just frustration, it was shock. Trump genuinely believed the Supreme Court would protect him. In his worldview, loyalty should flow downward from the power he once held. When it didn't, his instinct was to lash out. And this reaction matters, because it fits a long-established pattern. Trump has a history of praising judges only when they rule in his favor, and attacking them viciously when they don't. He has questioned judges' intelligence, motives, backgrounds, and legitimacy whenever they issue rulings against him. Over the years, this behavior has escalated from trial courts to appellate courts, and now to the Supreme Court itself. What makes this moment different is the scale. Attacking the nation's highest court, especially one that includes his own appointees, represents a dangerous escalation. The Supreme Court relies on public confidence to function. When political figures encourage supporters to view it as illegitimate, they weaken the foundation of the legal system itself. Legal experts immediately raised alarms. If Trump refuses to accept Supreme Court rulings that go against him, what does that say about his respect for the rule of law? And what happens if he faces trial, conviction, or sentencing and tells his supporters those outcomes are illegitimate too? Those questions are no longer theoretical, because now that the Supreme Court has spoken, the delays are ending. Trial courts that paused proceedings while waiting for guidance are now free to move forward. Schedules will be set, evidence will be presented, witnesses will testify, and juries, not politicians, will decide Trump's fate. For Trump, this is the scenario he worked hardest to avoid. Now we arrive at the consequences. And this is where the Supreme Court's decision truly changes everything. With Trump's immunity argument officially dismantled, the single most powerful tool he had for delaying his criminal cases is gone. Trial judges no longer have a reason to pause proceedings. The legal logjam that kept these cases frozen for months is breaking apart, and movement is coming fast. That means real trial dates, real courtrooms, real juries. In practical terms, this ruling opens the door for Trump to face one or more criminal trials before the election. Evidence that has remained abstract, filings, allegations, indictments, will now be presented publicly. Prosecutors will introduce documents, messages, recordings, and testimony under oath. Trump's legal problems will no longer live only in press releases and campaign speeches. They'll unfold live day by day in court. This is precisely what Trump has spent years trying to prevent. His political survival strategy depends on controlling the narrative. As long as cases stayed stuck in legal limbo, Trump could dismiss them as hoaxes, claim there was no evidence, and rally supporters with claims of persecution. Trials destroy that illusion. Trials force facts into the open. They place Trump's conduct under a microscope, not a political one, but a legal one. And juries don't answer to social media posts. The political consequences are potentially enormous. While Trump's core supporters are unlikely to abandon him no matter what happens, elections are decided on the margins. Independent voters, swing voters, and moderate Republicans consistently say that criminal convictions would change their view. A guilty verdict wouldn't just be historic, it would be radioactive. Trump running for president while standing trial, or worse, after being convicted, would be unprecedented. His campaign would be consumed by court appearances, legal arguments, and sentencing hearings instead of policy messaging. Every development would dominate headlines. Every witness would become a campaign issue. Democrats already see the opening. They will point out, relentlessly, that even conservative Supreme Court justices rejected Trump's arguments. They will argue that the legal system gave Trump every chance, and he still lost. That message resonates with voters who value institutions, stability, and the rule of law. And here's the part Trump can't escape. This decision came from the very court he reshaped. He cannot plausibly claim it's a partisan hit job when his own appointees sided against him. That fact alone shatters the narrative he's been selling for years, that all of his legal trouble is nothing more than political revenge. But Trump's response suggests he has no intention of adjusting course. Instead of recalibrating, he's escalating. By attacking the Supreme Court itself, Trump is signaling to his supporters that even the highest court in the land is illegitimate if it doesn't serve his interests. That's not just about one ruling. It's about conditioning millions of people to reject legal outcomes altogether. This is why legal scholars and constitutional experts are alarmed. Courts have no armies. They rely on voluntary compliance and public trust. When a major political figure tells supporters that judges are corrupt, cowardly, or part of a conspiracy, he's weakening one of the core pillars of democracy. And the danger doesn't end with this case. If Trump were to regain power while believing the legal system is rigged against him, his incentives would be deeply distorted. Accountability would feel optional. Constraints would feel illegitimate. The Supreme Court's ruling technically limits presidential immunity, but Trump's reaction shows he may reject the premise entirely. That's what makes this moment so pivotal. On one side, the legal system has drawn a bright line. Former presidents are not above the law. Criminal accountability still applies. Political power does not erase legal responsibility. On the other side, Trump is daring the system to enforce that principle against him, while he actively undermines faith in the institutions doing the enforcing. The coming months will test whether American democracy can withstand that pressure. Trump will be campaigning while defending himself in court. Prosecutors will be laying out evidence while Trump claims victimhood. Judges and juries will be making decisions while Trump questions their legitimacy in real time. The legal process and the political process will collide in ways the country has never experienced before, and voters will be forced to decide what matters more: loyalty to a political figure or loyalty to the rule of law. That's why this Supreme Court decision is bigger than Trump. It's a stress test for the entire system. If the law applies even to someone as powerful as a former president, it proves accountability still exists. If not, it sends a darker message that power can override justice. One thing is now undeniable: Trump's legal shield is gone. His Supreme Court strategy has failed. The delays are ending. The trials are coming. What happens next won't just determine Trump's fate. It will shape the future of American democracy itself.